Communications are breaking down, and the emergency services are stretched to the limit. 911 is inundated with almost 20,000 calls an hour. That's about 300 calls a minute, 5 every second. With phone lines down, Sandy's victims turn in desperation to social media like Twitter. Hundreds of tweets per minute are now arriving at the New York Fire Department's headquarters. Social media manager Emily Rahimi is trying to help.
I would say about 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, I started to see a lot more panicked tweets, which I've never experienced on Twitter before. There were a lot of people who were losing phone service, that were not able to get through to 911, who were tweeting in emergency calls. I was getting a sense of the panic definitely through the words that they were using, the speed in which they were tweeting. I would get, 4 tweets within a couple seconds of each other from the same person.
Among the many tweets was a dramatic plea for help. A woman fears for the safety of her parents trapped by the floods.
This woman tweeted very early in the evening that her parents were trapped in their home on Staten Island, and I told them that I was contacting dispatchers, but for them to also try contacting 911.
Staten Island was particularly hard hit by Sandy. Many of New York's fatalities occurred on this tiny island. Emily tries to save lives by using Twitter to send out vital advice.
That night, it was mainly just trying to communicate to the people that if their house is starting to fill up with water, that definitely meant that outside it was even worse. It was moving extremely quickly. It was moving as if it was a river. It was carrying a lot of debris. So being outside your house in that situation without a rescuer there who could help you was probably worse than actually being in your house. This storm was definitely a 21st century storm. And this is really, I think, the first one that has used social media to call for help.
Of the emergency calls made that night, emergency medical services responded to almost 6,000. But they're not the only ones pushed to the limit. Hospitals are also overwhelmed. On the Lower East Side, NYU Hospital has lost power and is evacuating over 200 critical patients. For these patients, this nightmare has become a matter of life or death. Manhattan is in a medical crisis.
Breaking news from Hurricane Sandy. CNN's Chris Welsh is live now in Lower Manhattan. The situation that's most pressing may well be what's happening at NYU University Hospital. What is going on down there in terms of the patients?
That's where they are now moving about 200 patients to various hospitals in the area because of these waters.
You would never think this was happening in New York. So the best way to deal with now is just not panic. I mean, the NYPD is doing all they can. They have a lot of patrol cars going on every single block. People just got to stay civil.
In New Jersey, Abby Wellington and Stephen Olafson face a medical emergency of their own. There's no power in their house. The roads are all blocked. Abby is pregnant. She doesn't realize she's about to give birth.
As the hurricane was starting, I was only days from my due date, so I was nervous.
We had lost our power. We had no heat, but it was probably around 9:30. We get in bed, and
I felt a little bit of pain, but nothing. It didn't feel like the contractions I felt last time. It came again maybe 8 or 10 minutes later. Then it seemed, okay, maybe something's starting.
Unable to reach a hospital, their only recourse is to reach out for help from their neighbor Jan.
I get a text, come, the baby's coming.
Abby is terrified at the prospect of delivering her baby without medical assistance.
So it was still scary, and it was very dark. We had no power. There were just a couple candles on in the bathroom, and I felt something. And we realized it was the bag of water, and that the head was coming, and that there wasn't actually anything wrong. It was just I really was about to have the baby in a half hour.
The baby is well on its way. Stephen and Jan improvise as they frantically search the house for anything that might help. They even find use for potato chip clips, an emergency measure to clamp off the umbilical cord. Within the hour, Abby gives birth by candlelight on her bathroom floor. Against all the odds, Abby's delivery goes smoothly, but it could have been a very different story.
This storm caused a lot of damage. A lot of people died. We're very lucky.
Superstorm Sandy was not stopping for anyone, not even baby Henley. A huge test for New York's emergency services comes at around 11 p.m. In Queens, downed power lines spark a devastating fire that tears through the neighborhood of Breezy Point. Breezy Point's residents suddenly face a deadly dilemma as the fire spread rapidly in storm-force winds. Fleeing through the floodwater is a risky business. The alternative? Staying put as their homes catch on fire. 70-mile-per-hour winds fan the fire. Burning embers the size of baseballs are blowing from house to house. Whatever is not flooded is on fire. At first, there was no one to fight the blaze. The local firemen are trapped on the second floor of their own fire station. By the time help arrives, almost 3 hours later, Breezy Point is in ruins. Communities are traumatized up and down the coast. Now, scientists were desperate to understand why Superstorm Sandy was so destructive. Despite the warnings, few had expected such devastation. Experts are now descending on New York and New Jersey to understand what happened. Wind engineer Tim Marshall is assessing Sandy's impact.
Now we're coming up to Breezy Point area.
The fires are out, but the true extent of the devastation is only starting to be realized.
This was the scene of a horrific event, as the storm surge came in and flooded all these homes, a lot of people were trapped. And then the worst nightmare you can think of happened. A fire began. The burned out area is over here on the right, and we're going to take a look at this. So here we can see just this area of devastation, just all burned up. Houses are gone, trees are burned up, the poles are all burned up. It looks like about 100 houses have been completely torched all the way on down. The burned area actually started near the ocean and then burned right on through. If there were more houses beyond it, I'm sure that fire would have continued, but it went ahead and stopped right there at the parking lot.
111 homes were destroyed by the fire at Breezy Point. But by some miracle, not a single life was lost. Storm chaser Jeff Petrowski is investigating the damage.
When the storm surge comes in, water has so much force, it does things of the unthinkable, such as placing cars on top of railings and posts, cars stacked on top of each other. During the peak of Hurricane Sandy, the storm surge at this location was about 5.5 to 6 feet, plus the waves were on top of that, which just inundated this entire area. If you look at this, look what it did to this location. Shacks, wood, boards, everything was hit and inundated and destroyed.
Residents are slowly returning to what's left of their homes.
And we didn't move anything. This was just the water moving everything. The water was up to the ceiling almost. I'm sorry. This was my refrigerator that I did actually fill up, thinking that, if anything, we'll have, but nothing could have prepared us for this. This is the bathroom. We did keep everything nice. This was our home, you know. I mean, I'm sorry.
Emergency services are still on the street, helping the bewildered residents to safety.
Now, are you staying here?
We're, my he's staying.
We have a ton of stuff at the firehouse.
I haven't been over there. I volunteered.
Whatever you need, go there.
Yeah.
We have a ton. We have blankets. We have flashlights, batteries, candles.
I don't know what I need anymore, you know? It's just...
But go and take something.
Volunteer fireman Daniel Kavanaugh spent the night rescuing people from their wrecked homes.
We had one death, actually a couple of houses away from the firehouse, closest to the water. He got trapped in his basement.
From the air, it's obvious to Tim Marshall that some of the houses below could turn into death traps.
This is the Jersey coast, and this is where Hurricane Sandy made landfall. This is what we're looking at right here. If we could swing around, there's the houses in the marsh over here.
Yeah, there's like a house in the middle of that field, see it?
There's several. There's several houses. Yeah. And there's one sitting on the road there as well. The top of the house is sitting right on the road. The water comes in with tremendous force. Your house is carrying all of its load downward, and when the waves come in, it basically cuts the legs out of the house, or the bottom out of the house, and the second story comes down where the first story was. These houses just simply lifted off their foundations and moved with the water inland. And it floated to that position there, right on the street.
I grew up here. I've been here since I was born. This is absolutely sickening. This is memories and generations just washed away. They'll never be able to replace it, never be able to rebuild.
Shock. I heard one cottage had been taken out to sea, but then I found out there was 4 that are just like, they just vanished. They're just completely gone.
How am I going to get all this out?
Seaside Heights is a picture of total destruction.
Part of the dock here, you can see it's buckled up where the waves have come underneath it. It's like the impression of the wave itself has been captured by the dock being pushed up.
Lower Manhattan was right in the danger zone. Sandy caused a record storm surge. 14 feet of water crashed through the city streets.
Never in my life, living in New York City.
You've never seen anything like that?
No.
The financial district's buildings did not have sufficient defenses to prevent flooding. New York's 108-year-old subway system suffered its greatest disaster. In some stations, water rose from track to ceiling. The reason for this mayhem is hidden beneath the streets. Historian Andrew Needham thinks he's figured out exactly why this area of Lower Manhattan is so vulnerable to flooding.
This is a big story about the conflict between humans and nature, and it's a story that almost no one in New York knows.